Turkey feels its security and territorial integrity is under threat. It is now fighting on two fronts: a campaign against ISIL fighters in Syria and against PKK targets in Iraq. Will it succeed in containing these threats, or does it risk getting further drawn into the conflict? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. NATO ambassadors have held a rare emergency meeting to review the threat ISIL poses to Turkey. It called the meeting to talk about the growing instability on its southern border. Up to now, Turkey's been reluctant to get involved in the US-led coalition fight against ISIL, but things have changed. Now Turkey is launching attacks inside Syria against ISIL and in northern Iraq against the Kurdish separatist group, the PKK. It's also agreed on a plan with the US to create a so-called buffer zone along its border with Syria. It would cover a 109-kilometer stretch inside Syria along Turkey's border. This is the area the Turks want to turn into what they call an ISIL-free zone. They hope it would prevent ISIL fighters from supplies of weapons, recruits and money through Turkey into Syria. By pushing ISIL out, it would allow Syrian refugees in Turkey to return home to Syria. Turkey is struggling to cope with more than 1.7 million Syrian war refugees. Now, this area, by definition, is a buffer zone. In other words, a neutral area free of aggression by the various warring sides. Turkey's long-standing request to have a no-fly zone or a demilitarized area in the sky has not been accepted by the Obama administration so far. So who will enforce this buffer zone and push all ISIL fighters out of it? Will the onus fall on the Turkish military, or will it get much-needed support? Zeynep Khoder has more from southern Turkey.
Turkey has long demanded a militarily imposed no-fly zone in Syria, and the West has always been reluctant. It involves international legal implications, a UN Security Council resolution, and Russia would most likely veto that. Now Turkey is again talking about some sort of buffer zone, but the United States making it very clear that a no-fly zone is not under consideration. But according to the US, what is under consideration is Turkish-US cooperation to rid northwest Syria from ISIL. Now, the coalition started to target ISIL in Syria last September, but the air campaign focused in the northeast of the country, where ISIL really had a strong presence, and ISIL was able to move freely between its strongholds in Syria and Iraq. What Turkey wants now is for the coalition to concentrate the air campaign in the territory behind me, in the northwest Syria. Turkey wants the coalition to help Syrian opposition groups. They want the coalition to regard them as partners on the ground, and the Syrian opposition groups do face a threat from ISIL. Now, no agreement on a no-fly zone. A lot of details that need to be worked out, especially what happens when ISIL is cleared from this area. Who is going to fill the vacuum? The Syrian opposition groups in the northeast of the country are not friendly with the United States, and Turkey does not want to see the Syrian Kurds fill the vacuum because it would just give them more strength. So, but at the end of the day, for the time being, the United States is welcoming increased cooperation with Turkey, and Turkey seems to have received some sort of concession, saying that it reached an agreement with the United States that air cover will be provided for Syrian opposition groups. Zeynep Khoder, Al Jazeera, southern Turkey.
Well, let's bring in our guests now to talk more about this. From Ankara, we're joined by Muhittin Ataman, Deputy General Coordinator for CETA, a political, economic and social think tank. In London is Wolfgango Piccoli, a Managing Director of Teneo Intelligence and co-author of Turkey at the Crossroads, Ottoman Legacies and a Greater Middle East. And in Washington, D.C., we have Joshua Walker. He is a fellow at the Truman National Security Project and former U.S. State Department advisor to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and John Kerry. Good to have you all with us. Muhittin, if I could start with you. This does seem like quite a turnaround from Turkey. What's behind this and why now?
The first thing is in recent weekends, ISIL forces were driven out of the eastern northeast part of the Syria, especially after the bombing of the US-led coalition and with the help of the PYD forces on the ground. The ISIL forces had to leave the northeast part of the country of Syria, and they transformed their forces to the northwest part of the country, and they began to intensify their attacks against the Syrian opposition groups. One of the main reasons was this transformation of power. The second one was the increasing harsh rhetoric and attacks by PKK organization and its affiliates, unfortunately forced Turkey to take some concrete steps. The second significant point is the change in the rhetoric and behavior of the PKK and its affiliates. After these two significant points, Turkey felt pressure, and especially after the attack in Suruç, the town of Urfa, just across the Kobani, one of the symbol of the Kurdish resistance against the ISIL forces. After 32 individuals were killed, and then PKK and PYD claimed that this was happened as a result of the collaboration between ISIL and the AK party. And therefore, they had to react this, and the people of Turkey were expecting a kind of strong response to have security on the border. As we all know that Turkey for a long time resisted to close the border because of the humanitarian reason, you know, the influx of the refugees into Turkey. But nowadays, unfortunately, the border is mostly used not by the refugees, but also by the PYD forces and by the ISIL forces. Therefore, Turkey had to take some concrete steps to prevent this.
Wolf Pickley, what do you think is going on here? And this has been described as a potential game changer in the Syrian conflict. Is it?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's too early to say that. Turkey so far has taken a very gradual approach, which has been maturing since the beginning of the month. But I will suggest that it's far too early to suggest that Turkey has embarked now in a decisive campaign against ISIL. If you look at just the record, looking at the kind of the bombing done by the Turkish fighters jets over the last few days, most of the targets were PKK targets in northern Iraq and not ISIL targets in Syria. So here Turkey is trying to pursue two different aims with some sort of al-cooked strategy, and the contradiction of the strategy could emerge very, very quickly, making things even more difficult for Ankara.
Joshua Walker, how do you see this unfolding, and how would all of this work? I mean, there seems to be some dispute as to, or some debate rather, as to whether this is a buffer zone or a no-fly zone. First of all, what's the difference, and how is this going to work in practice?
You know, I think from the beginning of the Syrian conflict, Turkey has been very consistent. I think, as we've already heard, domestic politics are premium in Ankara these days. And the question really is a buffer zone versus a no-fly zone. Washington and its coalition partners have been clear that they will not enforce a no-fly zone because that would mean having to take out all of Assad's anti-aircraft weapons. Turkey had one of its airplanes shot down a couple years ago, you remember, and there was another NATO meeting called at that time. No action was taken. This time, I think it looks different. Turkey seems to be in the position where basically it sees an opportunity to take out all terrorist organizations. They have come to the belief that simply sitting back and watching the humanitarian disaster in Syria continue will no longer be tenable because of domestic Turkish politics. Remember, right now, there is no government in Turkey. There's a caretaker government since the June 7th elections. Therefore, President Erdogan, as the only democratically elected leader, has to be strong. And I think I would agree with my colleagues that it is too soon to tell what's happening right now. Washington is very excited about the new movement. Turkey is showing for the first time a military military appetite to take on ISIL, but I would also agree that what it seems to be doing is prioritizing the PKK and other traditional terrorist organizations, although I do think they are sincere in going against ISIL as well.
All right, well, Al Jazeera spoke earlier to Osman Sert, a media advisor to the Turkish Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu. He says Turkey's fight with the Kurds is nuanced. Here's what he had to say.
We are not fighting with Syrian Kurds. We are fighting in Syria and in Iraq with terrorist organizations, okay? We have Kurdish population, we have Kurdish ministers, Kurdish MPs, and that's why not with the Kurds we are giving a fight. But in Kobani especially, nobody should forget that more than 694,000 Kobani residents were received by Turkey when ISIS was attacking over there. And the Kurdish Peshmerga passed through Turkish border in order to save Kobani. And that's why nobody should put some question marks regarding whether Turkey is giving a fight Syrian Kurds against ISIS. We are so clear about it. And as long as the Syrian Kurds, PYD or others, are just giving fight with ISIS, giving fight with the regime, Assad regime, which is the main cause of the problems, main cause of evil in the region, we have no problem with them.
All right, so Muhittin Ataman, let me turn back to you then, and one of the points that you made earlier there about the PKK. We heard the advisor to the Turkish Prime Minister essentially not making any distinction between how Turkey views the PKK and ISIL, essentially regarding both of them as terrorists. But the fear among many, because of this renewed